In today's video, we're breaking down Dillon Gabriel of the Oregon Ducks. What are his strengths and weaknesses? Do we think that his play translates to the NFL? Do we think he generally fits the parameters of what we believe to be an NFL quarterback? And finally, do we think he gets the draft capital and he's the fantasy asset that we're looking for? Watch to the end of this video and you'll have a good idea. Taking a look at his size, he's officially 5'10" and a half, 202 pounds. And so that is incredibly short for a quarterback. Generally, we want our quarterbacks to be at least 6'1", but preferably 6'3" and taller. Otherwise, they might have trouble seeing over the short and intermediate area, the middle of the field. And that is a struggle with Gabriel. And it just kind of limits the potential for you unless you are able to throw with some ridiculous anticipation without even being able to see what you're doing per se at times as one of these shorter quarterbacks. And so, straight off the bat, he is very, very short. Now, being 202 pounds, that obviously isn't huge either, but for his size, that's not necessarily bad or anything. It's just, once again, his overall height is definitely something to be concerned about. Now, when we take a look at his career, he has played 6 seasons of collegiate football for 3 total schools. And now, typically with, players like wide receivers, and specifically that position, we definitely care a lot more than we do with quarterbacks because we've seen recently the success of players like, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, and the like, who've had multiple years of collegiate experience and honestly potentially helps them in their rookie seasons due to the experience, especially with reading defenses. Now, when you take a look at his true freshman season, he completed 235 of 398 pass attempts. That was a completion percentage of 59%, which is quite poor, honestly. For 3,653 yards, 9.2 yards per attempt is solid, though, for sure. 29 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. For a true freshman, that is an impressive touchdown to interception ratio. On the ground, on 54 attempts, he had 184 yards, 3.4 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, but 6 fumbles. The 6 fumbles are pretty bad. And once again, to be fair to him, though, sack totals are deducted from your rushing output. So his rushing yards probably would have been substantially higher than that for sure. Then taking a look at his true sophomore season at UCF, he completed 248 of 413 attempts for a 60% completion percentage. So once again, not very good, but at least it was up. His 3,569 passing yards and 8.6 yards per attempt are a little bit less than the prior season, but he did have 32 passing touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. He also had a 90.4 PFF passing grade, so that's impressive for sure. Then taking a look at his rushing production on 54 attempts, just like with his true freshman season, he had 289 yards on the ground, upped his yards per attempt from 3.4 to 5.4. His touchdowns went from 4 to 2 on the ground, and he also had 8 fumbles, so we don't like that for sure. And as you can see, fumbles are generally an issue with him, although to be fair to him, interceptions aren't. Taking a look at his true junior season, he suffered a broken clavicle, and so he only had 70 out of 102 attempts completed, which was 68.6%. Now the sample size is definitely limited, but that's tremendous growth there. 814 passing yards. His yards per attempt did dip to a career low at that point, 8.0, and that would actually end up being his career low. 9 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions, which is fine. On the ground, 18 for 161 and 2 with 1 fumble. Then he transferred to Oklahoma. Taking a look at his production at Oklahoma, he completed 234 of 373 attempts in his true senior season for a 62.7 completion percentage, which isn't very good once again. He had 3,184 passing yards, 8.5 yards per attempt, 25 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions. But when you take a look on the ground, this was a significant jump in production. He had 69 attempts for 415 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, but 5 fumbles. However, you will definitely take the rushing output from him here. Then taking a look at his 5th year, he had 264 out of 383 attempts completed, which was a 68.9% completion percentage, which was a career high and markedly better than anything we had seen before with enough of a sample size. 3,655 passing yards, what was a career high 9.5 yards per attempt, which is fantastic. 30 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, a new career high 90.6 PFF passing grade. But when you take a look at his rushing production, his 85 attempts for 456 yards, 5.4 yards per attempt, 12 rushing touchdowns were awesome. But once again, we did see 5 fumbles, and that's, once again, something we see from him from season to season. Then when you take a look at his production this past season after he transferred to Oregon, he completed 326 of 451 attempts for a new career high 72.3 completion percentage, which is very respectable for sure. 3,854 passing yards, 8.5 yards per attempt, which is a dip in production in terms of the yards per attempt, but isn't obscenely poor or anything. 30 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions, an 86.3 PFF passing grade, 62 attempts, 300 yards, and 7 touchdowns on the ground with 4 fumbles. And so when you take a look at this profile, there's definitely some issues with fumbling, but he generally doesn't throw that many interceptions. And so taking a look at some advanced stats from this past season, among draft-eligible FBS quarterbacks with at least 320 dropbacks, that was a sample size of 44 total quarterbacks here. His PFF passing grade of 86.3 was 7th in the sample size. That's definitely respectable. His adjusted completion percentage, which takes away purposeful incompletions, throwaways, of 81.9% was first. That is very, very impressive. Taking a look at his yards per attempt, his 8.5 were tied for 8th. Once again, that's markedly less than his 5th year where he had 9.5. But once again, being tied for 8th in this sample size is definitely respectable. He had 30 passing touchdowns, which is tied for 6th. We like that. Taking a look at his interceptions, his 6 were tied for 6th fewest in the sample size. And so we definitely like the touchdown to interception ratio here. Taking a look at his big time throw percentage, his 3.2% is 11th lowest in the sample size. That is something we generally don't like to see. We want our quarterbacks making big time plays. Taking a look at his turnover worthy play percentage, his 1.6% was 3rd lowest though. And so generally he does take care of the ball, and that is something that we like with our quarterbacks. Turning the ball over at too high of a clip is definitely something that could get you benched. Taking a look at his dropped pass percentage, his 6.6 were 22nd in the sample size, so middle of the road there. His pressures, which are pressures that he does not incur upon himself, his 137 were 20th in the sample size. So his line was pretty decent, to be honest with you. Taking a look at his pressure to sack ratio, his 13.9% was 8th lowest. That is something that is very, very important, is being able to elude sacks and get the ball out, because, sacks are just drive killing plays for your offense. And then taking a look at his time to throw, his 2.78 seconds was 18th highest in the sample size. So nothing worrying in the sense of, players like Caleb Williams who just scramble and try to extend the play as much as humanly possible to get the ball out downfield. He doesn't generally have that issue. Now, as far as the grading goes for Dillon Gabriel, remember that he's a little bit south of 5'11" and 202 pounds, and he's a 6-year senior out of Oregon with multiple transfers. Now, we've seen recently that really hasn't mattered with players like Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, and the like, but that is something to note. But experience, once again, has helped some of these quarterbacks recently. And in terms of my valuation, I think he's worthy of a 3rd-round pick. Now, in terms of my playstyle comparison, I think he resembles a more athletic Tua Tagovailoa, especially scrambling, and in the QB run game somewhat too. Now, he reminds me of Tua Tagovailoa in that he tries to play on time and is a rhythm thrower, but things can go awry when he's unable to play in rhythm. He does possess more athleticism than Tua and has the ability to scramble and extend the play, but much like Tua, just doesn't possess the arm talent to really hit all the areas of the field, especially with zip. And he also just isn't quite as quick of a processor as Tua, but once again, I think that he somewhat resembles Tua on the field. Now, in terms of his arm talent, I think that he can make all the throws that you want in the short and intermediate areas of the field with great accuracy and ball placement to not only pick apart zone coverages with anticipation, but also to protect his receivers from massive hits. And I think that this overall is one of the biggest strengths of his game. In terms of the short accuracy, he's almost always accurate with the hitches and the speed outs, including great ball placement, and he excels in the RPO game. But, over the short middle area of the field, especially when he doesn't have a wide open pocket to be able to see through, he does struggle, and that's just going to be the way it is with a lot of these shorter quarterbacks. In terms of his medium accuracy, he's pretty accurate with those 10-yard hitches and 10-yard out routes, but he does struggle over the intermediate area of the field, which I believe, once again, mostly would be due to his height. And once again, that's common with guys this short. I really don't think that he's going to be able to improve that much. He's generally going to have to trust what he thinks is going to happen. Now, in terms of his deep accuracy, he just lacks the ability to drive the ball deep downfield with zip, and sometimes takes too many hitches to be able to get the ball down there, which can lead to late throws and thus interceptions, and worrying interceptions as well, which, once again, I just don't know how much he's going to be able to improve this at the NFL level. But he can throw a solid deep ball in terms of the actual touch and the arc of it. It's just, once again, he has to be able to anticipate this, and sometimes the velocity, depending on the situation, just isn't going to be able to be there for him. Now, in terms of his throw-off platform, His accuracy really does suffer when he's throwing off platform. I think he's more so going to be effective when he's able to step up in the pocket and reset rather than just throwing on the run. But he more so likes to hit the flats than trying to hit these shots deep downfield, especially off platform. Now, in terms of his speed, he has the speed to be relatively dangerous on scrambles, but I wouldn't say he's a dynamic threat in the run game. I don't think that there's going to be too many opportunities for him to be running QB draws, particularly, but he's effective in the read zone option game. And I definitely think that he has, once again, more upside than Tua does as a runner, despite that being the playstyle comp. In terms of his acceleration, he has enough to escape the pocket and convert first downs. But like his speed, it really just isn't dynamic. And while he can be effective on the read zone options, I just once again I don't really think you're going to be asking him to be Lamar Jackson. In terms of his scramble intelligence, he usually extends the play inside the pocket rather than scrambles. But he is capable of doing so and generally avoids big hits when doing so, which is important, especially for somebody with his frame. But once again, he just really doesn't scramble much in the sample size of games that I watched. So overall, I think he's just more of your pocket passer type of quarterback, but he's capable of doing so. Kind of like Caleb Williams, even though Caleb Williams does like to extend out of the pocket. Once again, he likes to throw the ball more so than try to scramble for the first down. But just like with Caleb, he'll do so when necessary. It's just not as often on film. Now, in terms of his rushing upside, he's not going to be a prolific rusher, but he can be effective in the read zone option game. And I think he's going to be one of those less total rushing yards, but more so rushing touchdown type of quarterbacks if he's able to see the field. Now, in terms of his pre-snap ability, he's an experienced quarterback. You know, he was a 6-year player in college, and so that's helped him be able to diagnose coverages pre-snap. And he's not really caught off guard by blitzes very often with the experience in which he's gotten. And he generally has a good idea where to go with the ball post snap. As far as his post snap ability, he does use eye manipulation and pump fakes against zone coverage, which is effective. But he can be a little bit slow reading through his progressions. And when he is fooled by the defensive coverage, there are some worrying throws. He excels in the RPO game and generally reads the leverage of defenders correctly, but he can be a little bit late getting the ball out at times, which can lead to unnecessary tight window throws and interceptions along the sidelines. And his ability to consistently see over the middle of the field is going to hinder him. And so, like with some of these shorter quarterbacks, it just limits you to the outside areas of the field, or if you have a pocket to be able to see, you're just going to have to throw with anticipation and trust that what you think is going to happen is going to happen when you're not able to see it. So I really don't know that he's going to be able to improve too much here. Now, in terms of his pocket presence, he generally does have good pocket presence and a good feel for where the defenders are coming from and a good movement ability to be able to extend the play inside the pocket. And it really just doesn't invite too much unnecessary pressure to himself, at least in the sample size of games watched. Now, in terms of his play extension, he extends the play inside the pocket quite well by moving efficiently in the pocket. He doesn't really, once again, invite too much unnecessary pressure to himself. But outside the pocket, he really just hits the shallow routes along the sidelines. He doesn't really look to extend the play and then look downfield for some of those deeper shots. But I think that's more so his intelligence in terms of he understands that he has limitations throwing on the run off platform, as well as a just general lack of arm talent to be able to throw with zip deep down the field. And so I really think that's more so him just understanding his own deficiencies and working around them, which is good. And in terms of his clutch factor, he converted a 4th and 9 against Wisconsin that ultimately led to a game-winning rushing touchdown by Jordan James. And he also threw a game-winning touchdown against number 3 Texas back in 2023. So he has shown an ability to be clutch. And as far as my worries / limitations, once again, will he be able to overcome his height? We've seen that Bryce Young has been able to somewhat for half a season, but, for a season and a half, he was benched and just was unable to. And typically, players like Kyler Murray are super athletes, right? So while Kyler Murray isn't necessary, and he's, not necessarily the best quarterback either, but Dillon Gabriel just doesn't have the ridiculous athleticism that Kyler does to overcome this deficiency in height. So that will be something to monitor. And then also, will he even get a chance to play due to draft capital? We'll have to see about that. Once again, I think that he can be a Tua Tagovailoa-like quarterback with a little bit more rushing upside, but, Tua, once again, just isn't the highest ceiling type of quarterback for us at the NFL level. And so where does Dillon Gabriel rank among his contemporaries in the 25 class, at least the quarterbacks in which we've released videos for so far, as well as the 24 class stacked on top of each other? Well, Caleb Williams is still the only elite prospect I've graded in the past 2 seasons. But then we have Jaden Daniels and Drake May leading the great tier of prospects, which both were from 2024. In this class, we have Cam Ward and Kyle McCord. Once again, I'll say this a million times. Kyle McCord rather, really surprised me. I had no idea I was going to be this high on what I saw from him on film. Then we take a look at the good tier of quarterbacks. Here we have Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Howard from this class, and we have Dillon Gabriel tied with Howard. But due to Howard's more prototypical build and potential to be, at least in my opinion, drafted higher than Gabriel, I definitely would have the tiebreaker going to Howard. Then we have McCarthy, Spencer Rattler, and Joe Milton III. And so once again with Gabriel, he's 5'10 and a half, so very, very short, much shorter than the typical 6'1" at least height that we want to see out of our quarterbacks. 202 pounds. He is a 6th-year senior, and so he's definitely an older prospect. Now, with quarterbacks specifically, we've seen older prospects coming out recently and succeeding, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Evaluation, I think he's worthy of a 3rd-round pick. I definitely think he could be a solid backup. And my comp is Tua Tagovailoa with more rushing upside. So generally, try to be an anticipatory thrower. Doesn't have the elite arm strength that we want. But I definitely think he has more rushing ability, especially in the read option game, and more scramble ability to not get decked. And as far as the grade, I give him a 71.5 out of 100. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Major Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in the comment section. As far as what you'll gain, you'll get access to a private Discord server. I'm going to have a real life and fantasy football chat where we talk about real life NFL news. Any questions you might have will be answered in the real life NFL chat. And as far as the fantasy football chat, we'll talk about what's happening in the fantasy world. I'll give you team reviews, give you optimal roster construction based on your specific league settings, trades you can make to strengthen your roster, buying and selling points, specifically price points for various players based on your positions of need. I'll give you a special shout out, obviously, on all of these videos. You'll get early access to videos. You'll be part of private live streams that are not available to regular YouTube members. And you will also have the ability to suggest videos specifically for you on Patreon. I've already made one on Isaac Rendo as per request by one of my Patreon members. And so once again, if you would like to join, the link is going to be in the comment section. Thanks.